Hello and welcome to Noclip, the Noclip podcast, episode 52. It might be our final one of the year, but it's the greatest of the year because we're going to talk about the greatest video games of the year, or at least the games that we enjoy the most. It is our Game of the Year podcast for 2021. Woo. I am your host, Danny, and I'm joined, yes, by a mixed bag, a melange of Noclip experts and contributors to our biggest ever amount of people on a podcast to talk about as many games as we can. And also we are joined by the beautiful patrons who have submitted some of their favorite games of the year, and we're going to run through as many as we possibly can. Let me go through, first of all, though, our contributors. Delighted to join to the podcast the very first time, even though he's probably the person I've collaborated with the longest over most of my amateur video games career, I would say, and some of my professional. Mr. Dennis Walsh, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Amateurish is what I'm going to bring to the table. So yeah, I'm gonna bring your podcast back to where it was 15 odd years ago.
I appreciate it. Dennis has been doing the Noclip archive in the background for the past 3 or 4 years, as well as captioning. He captioned the Forgotten City documentary, which should be going up later today at time of recording, except in true Noclip form, I found something I wanted to edit 2 seconds before I was about to publish it, so it's re-rendering right now. But thank you so much for getting those subs done, Dennis. Next on the list is Mr. Frank Howley, no stranger to the pod. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. As always, excited to talk about video games and also to be overwhelmed by how many games I still have to play.
Yeah. Did you have that pressure over the weekend, Frank, of like, oh shit, I really should play this game before we talk on Monday? Or were you kind of like, whatever, I'm just going to talk about it?
This weekend I kind of let it go, but 2 weeks ago I did catch up on a few games. So that way I have like enough ground to like talk about it, but I still don't feel confident that I've like beaten many games. But
right.
I sampled. It's like going to Costco and I had like sample bites of everything.
Nice. Get the pizza. It's pretty good. Jeremy Jane, delighted to have you on, sir. I know you were playing some games over the weekend. Did any of the, without revealing what they are, did any of the games you play over the weekend make it onto your list?
Absolutely. In fact, I won't reveal what game it was, but if I sound tired, it's because I stayed up very late completing a game that was like a game I had to play this year, and I knew it, and then it ended up making it onto my list. So
terrific.
That is why I was up very late last night.
Nice. Well, I know one game that's on your list already, and that's good. And last, but certainly not least, the man on the wheels of steel, podcast producer, Mr. Jesse Gracia. How you doing, sir?
Yo, what's happening? I'm good. I'm like everybody else. I'm excited to talk about video games. Lots of good stuff. Lots of weird stuff. Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, this is going to be a weird year. I'm excited to see what comes on everyone's list because I think who comes on everyone's list. It's weird putting that. Fucking hell, let's get this show started. Let's clean up the list before we read them because it's just one of those years where I can't, like, all the game awards, game of the year stuff, it was just all over the place in terms of like what are the games that people think are the best, and our Patreon comments was similar. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go alphabetical, which yes, it does put me at the top of the list, but we're going to go through one game each basically, just sort of advocating for it. We'll have a bit of a scrum about it, and then we'll go back to the top again, and I'll go again, then Dennis, then Frank, then Jeremy, then Jesse, and people can basically put their hands up and say, oh, this is a game that I also had. And then we'll also sort of dip into the Patreon questions when those games come up, because I have a feeling that some of those will come up. But yeah, let's get the show rolling. Okay, I'm going to talk about a game that I thought was my game of the year for most of the year. And I'm not sure if it's my game of the year, but it's definitely like in the top 3 for sure. Does anyone else have Valheim on their list?
Yes.
Okay, we've 3 of us, Dennis and Frank. Okay. I'm going to open the floor actually, because I played Valheim on a server with a bunch of my mates from back home in Ireland, including Dennis. You built your place basically next to mine. Why is it on your game of the year list?
Yeah, okay, so some of it's definitely going to be this kind of joyful group experience that we all had, and that was good. We haven't kind of been back together in a game like that and been excited by a game like that in a long time. But Yeah, so I've never got into these building games. I've always there's been some sort of block, Rust or even Minecraft. They've always just been like, oh, what's the catch? What's going to hook me in? But this one did it. This one like got me to sink, I don't know, 300 hours in probably 2 weeks or something like that. It just absolutely adored it from start to finish. Even the first few minutes when I played with you, I thought, oh, this is hokey. This is not going to catch me. And then maybe an hour later, there's no way I'm going to bed that night. It's just, yeah, the perfect little excursion. Now, you've kind of ruined my potential to contribute to this podcast because that was my slam dunk recommendation for this year. And then after that, everything's a little bit of a, ooh, I played a bit of this, but not a lot.
Yeah, I was worried that might happen. I should have gone to something else. But let's chew on it then. Like, let's have a little bit of a chinwag about it, because I'm in the same spot where there are games like this that I have enjoyed and dabbled in over the years, but there's something about the mystery in this game that just completely enraptured me. And that, you can't discount the sort of like the friendship element, where even like a shit game is a lot of fun if you're playing with mates. But like, I remember just there was enough familiar stuff, right? There's like a good backbone of, oh, you're collecting stuff and you're crafting stuff and you're building stuff, and like I've seen this in other games and it's like fairly obvious, and they're sort of like spoon feeding you a little bit of like, this is what you do here, this is what you do here. But then all of the like ingredients and elements, like how you combine those things, are really unknown. Like, and also like when we started this game, and we will do our best on this podcast, we'll do it game by game. There are going to be some games where we just have to get into like deep spoilers a bit, but let's telegraph where we're doing it. But or very early game spoilers for this. I wasn't sure if this game was just set. I just thought it was set in the forest. Like, I didn't know there was going to be more biomes, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. And the moment I'll always remember is when we finally got it, like we built a boat and went over to the other island and then found this desert, and then a fucking mosquito killed all three of us like in like 1 second. And it was kind of like this moment of, oh no, to get back there we have to like spend hours getting enough resources to build a boat and get all the way back over there again, and also like not die so we don't lose our stuff. And then also, like, why did that mosquito kill us in one go? Like, were we just ill prepared? Does that thing kill you? It was just like all these, like, the first time we saw a troll together was like a real what the fuck moment. Frank, you obviously played a bunch of this as well on your insane ICP Xbox server with your mates. What is it about Valheim that has it on your list?
I think it mystified me the same way that World of Warcraft did when I was in like a freshman in high school, where it was a thing where we could log on, all my friends were on, everyone was working on their own like self-made quests. Like, someone had the craziest farm. I was logging on every day to make an Xbox museum. I had friends who were really into hunting and farming and looting, and like I like played on a server with maybe a dozen people, and like the thing that strikes me first is the day we all ventured out onto sea in a boat for the first time, and we sailed like what felt like maybe 20 minutes. We got to a land of new beasts, and we were all completely wiped out, but we tried our hardest to defend a portal. Like, it was this crazy adventure. Like, that in itself felt like a video game, like, story quest. And that was just, it was just in part of the world. And like, we were hooked on it for like a full month of just every day logging on, like even the satisfaction of chopping down trees, having the physics of the logs roll down and also fall on your friends. Like, you can be mischievous while playing it. Like, I role played like I did on Gmod servers. Like, it just combined a bunch of things I loved about multiplayer gaming that I completely forgot about, that I felt like I did a lot in high school. And yeah, similar to Dennis, how like I never got into Minecraft or things like that, but this was the game that finally hooked me in terms of crafting, surviving, building, and like online mischief and mayhem in a fantasy setting, I guess. But I loved it.
Yeah, you can make a good point. The like moment to moment fun of that game, of just the physics of the logs falling down when you like hit one tree and it knocks another tree down, just all that little satisfaction, little moments you get. But yeah, that whole idea of people going on different missions, like Dennis, I remember one of the coolest things was I would log on, because obviously I'm on California time, you're in Ireland, and other ones of our friends, some of them were on my time, some were on your time, but like I'd log on and you and Dale had like gone on this like multi-portal quest and found like some elements that none of us had, and you'd be like, come over to my house so you can like pick up the element and get all the recipes.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually it's really what Frank said that interested me, that we actually you're doing this kind of funny storytelling in this not narrativeless game, but like more or less it's like this little, like it's it's almost like we're trying to tell stories, just drunk stories from a night out to people, and they don't get it, and they'll never get it, and they'll be like, oh, why are you telling me the story? It's terrible, it's boring. But like dying to a mosquito over and over again was just an absolute triumph of video games for me. Maybe the best fun I've had in a decade. Just dying to a mosquito 5 times in a row, and all of us hollering and just screaming on Discord. It's perfect gameplay for me.
Yeah, like the idea that we're all on different quests as well. Like I remember where, you know, even if you're on the run to a boss, like if somebody took a different route through the forest, like, and suddenly they're like, oh fuck, like you hear them screaming on Discord, and you're like, what's going on? It's like, there's 2 trolls, or like, you know, I wasn't paying attention and I went into like a crypt, and there's now 15 skeletons killing me, and you have to run over and like help them. Or the bosses, like when we were all trying to figure out how to kill the bosses, that was so much fun, because you're kind of like, there's this whole thing where sometimes you pick up things and they don't really do anything yet, you know, like some of the objects, and you're kind of wondering like, oh, is this really important to this thing, or have they just not like patched in a reason for it yet? Or like, you know, I remember Dale had his what was the pet beasts he had in the desert?
Oh, the ox type things. What are they called?
Yeah, those big hairy things.
It's just called a vox or something. VOX.
Vox. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. It's in that realm anyway. Yeah, it's just like the fact that like now when we go back to that desert, we have basically dominated that world. Like it's the whole game is kind of like a proxy for like human encroachment on natural resources, you know, just chopping down trees and like, yeah, this desert that we were terrified of forever because these mosquitoes would kill you, and then figuring out that you could kill them in one shot too, but like, you remember all the arrows we'd waste just trying to shoot one
from
that was like
the other side of the map
before
because we're
pulling
so
it?
scared of this mosquito. And it was Lox. Sorry for anybody screaming at the podcast.
Lox.
But, Lox. LOX.
Nice. Yeah. Any final thoughts on Valheim, either of you guys?
I'm excited to dip back into it because I think it's still in early access development, and I think they've put out a few updates for it. But I'm excited to one day. I hope we can recapture that magic when there's even more to do. But yeah, I spent a whole month in that game, and I'll cherish it. It was really fun to play.
That's a good question for Dennis, actually. So we have this server, it's still up, and I can't not have it up because I'm worried that like all the stuff will get deleted. So I'm like, no, it can stay there. But why do you think it hasn't had that moment where everyone's gone back? And I don't just mean our server. It seems to be the case for a lot of people where, you know, they did the big Heart and Home expansion, which seemed to add a bunch of like elements to the homes and some extra bits and bobs, but it didn't have any like big continent updates or new bosses, I don't think, or anything like that. Why do you think, Dennis, that like there hasn't been the big bum rush back to it?
Yeah, looking at this, like putting together notes for this podcast, it was like slightly hurtful that they didn't capitalize on that early momentum at all. And like, I don't want to be argumentative from the get-go, but when you say the big Heart and Home update, you know, it wasn't that big, I think, was the problem. It was really just a slight building upgrade with a few new things and some modifications. But yeah, we exhausted the true content of the game in that 3 weeks. And some of that's because we were all wildly addicted and playing it hard, exactly like Frank, just like, you know, went at it hard for a month with a bunch of friends. And then why would I come back? I want to believe, Frank, that I'm going to try and go back to it in next year, you know, when the next big update comes. I think it was supposed to be Mistlands. They had a roadmap, I remember, at the start for like 5 or 6 updates.
Yeah.
Only one of them came to fruition, and it was kind of the least intriguing of a lot of them at the time, because it was supposed to be Cult of the Wolf and Mistlands and one or two other kind of big things, and then there's the Heart and Home for, you know, fancy things to put around your house. So I truly hope it will. I think we'd have to go New World, Danny, though, so maybe you can nuke that server.
Oh, you're right, actually. Yeah, that is the joy of it, is the building up of. It's kind of like going back to like a Fallout save where like all this stuff has happened and you're kind of, oh fuck, what am I supposed to do now? Yeah, I think there's definitely an asterisk then on Valheim as well, right? Because of that, because it just didn't. It was a massive slam dunk early access right at the start, but you know, given probably the size of the team and probably I imagine they had quite a lot of bug fixing that like freaked them out right away. But for whatever reason, yeah, none of the stuff has come out at any click. You know, the game will be out in a year, in a couple of months' time, and they've just done that. So yeah, terrific game, but a lot more potential. Dennis and Frank, are you going to keep Valheim on your list? Because if that happens, I might just skip over you guys and go straight to the other two.
Yeah,
They
that sounds
haven't had
fair.
a chance to speak yet. What do you think?
Skip
Yeah.
me.
Okay. Let's do that then. Jeremy. Sorry. Hopefully he's still there. He hasn't
Oh, I'm here.
Let's open the floor to you then. What is one of the games on your list for Game of the Year?
All right. So first, everyone cognitively, I would like to just imagine that I'm dimming the lights and lighting a very moody candle as I explain this. I played Inscription over the last week, and it is one of the best games I've ever played in my life. It is. There's so many reasons why, but the thing I want to start with is that so I have always really disliked card-based games for some reason, or like that's not fair to say that. I haven't given enough of them a try in the past to determine whether or not that genre was for me. I kind of just assumed that it wasn't for me, and the reason for that is that it always seemed to me that like I played a lot of like cards, like physical cards growing up, and I kind of thought that like playing a card-based video game, even if it was like, you know, like something like Hearthstone or like Magic the Gathering inspired, it was always kind of like, well, why would I like use like computers are so powerful that why would I use that to simulate something that I could do with like a piece of paper and a pen?
Not a big video poker fan then?
Back in the day, maybe. But one of the games that changed that for me was Slay the Spire. And I loved Slay the Spire so much. And I think the thing that it showed me is that the cards are kind of like, it's no different than any other like input system in a game. Like they just represent actions that you can take, and it's not like I think that it clicked for me that they're just kind of like an abstraction, that like a game being card based is not necessarily it's not a limitation. Like it doesn't turn everything into like, you know, Texas Hold'em or whatever. But the thing that Inscription did was Slay the Spire is on like a moment-to-moment gameplay level incredible. Like one of my favorite roguelikes, and the game that like convinced me that I like, you know, deck building and like card-based games. But what Inscription does is it does, and I'm gonna keep this insanely spoiler-free because this game is like.
This is the problem.
Yeah, for sure. I will do my best. But I anyone who is gonna play Inscription, like, please don't look up anything. I know I'll try to keep it non-spoilery. But what Inscription does is it takes like the actual card playing is incredibly tight, and like the moment to moment gameplay is very refined and like very fun and frenetic, and it's a really, really good kind of like, I've seen people describe it as like a tug of war system where it's like one moment you could be super down, and then you have like, you pull the right card and you have a comeback, and it's this very kind of like, you're always a moment away from winning or losing. Like it's very like a knife fight in a closet kind of thing, to borrow a phrase. But beyond that, what it does is, if the game was just the cards, I would say, oh, this is like an amazing deck building game, like a card-based kind of roguelike game. But what it does beyond that is that the contextualization of the card-based mechanics of like, you're in a darkened room with a mysterious figure, you're playing the card game, and there's like other things around the room, kind of like an escape room puzzle box style thing to explore. So at any minute between battles, you can step up from the table and go walk around the room and explore a bunch of different things that are all kind of like these mysterious objects, and like, and all of them have an impact on the game itself. But also there's this perpetual mystery of like, what is this place? Why am I here? What am I doing? And the game invites you to doubt the game world a little bit. Like there are kind of like little hints and pokes. Like the only one I'll give away happens in the first few minutes, where one of your cards starts talking to you.
So good, yeah.
And it's fantastic. Like it's just like, the way I would describe Inscription is, it's a game that it's like you're playing a game of chess, and you're like 3 moves away from winning, and then someone rips a pair of VR goggles off of your face, and you realize that like you didn't even know that you were wearing the goggles. Like it is a game that it's a painting that where the artist just like kept going beyond the frame and painted the entire room, but it reveals itself in these kind of like, these veils pull back over time. And I it's hard to say more than that about that aspect of it,
Yeah.
because that is kind of like, I don't know. It's absolutely brilliant. I love it so much. It's an incredibly tight game on a moment to moment basis, but on like a meta scale, it is a I think it shows what games as a medium can do that like movies and like other forms of storytelling cannot do, because it I love movies that subvert your expectations, but there's something about like games subverting your expectations where you're in the driver's seat and you're still getting duped that just like it feels like magic.
Yeah. Let's. I got a bunch of interesting Patreon shout outs for Inscription too. Before that, was there anyone else who had it on their list?
Yeah, I did, and it's so funny hearing Jeremy's like take on it and his take on like becoming a fan of the card game genre, or specifically the roguelike one, because I mean it's the same lineup for me. I was never really into digital card games. I didn't really play the Magic the Gathering stuff online. I tried playing Yu-Gi-Oh card game stuff, but there's so much, rules lawyering and those kinds of games that you can't make that work. Every 5 seconds they're like, hey, do you want to do this? All right, it's your special phase 2. Like every 5 seconds there's something, right? Where Slay the Spire and now Inscription, I think, really nail that reduction of rules and just give you cards that do really interesting things. And like you're saying with Inscription, just that tug of war was a great description, I think, of how the game plays out. That tooth stuff, that's it. That's all I'll say. I shouldn't even said that. But yeah, the way that it plays out and the way that the combat goes is so fluid, so smooth. You really hit everything I wanted to say, which is just so funny. Like you hit, like almost every single thing. Like it's so perfectly done. Especially though the sound design, I think, is something that's super understated.
Yeah, special shout out for the visuals, right, Jesse? Like just like production design of the whole thing is just so smart.
Seriously gorgeous. I like it, just everything about it, from the production to the gameplay to the everything else, is really really good. And yeah, just I love the sounds of things hitting that wooden table. I want someone to use that in like a jazz background noise thing that you play on YouTube that's 10 hours long. Someone needs to just include those
Inscription
noises.
ASMR.
Yeah, with rain mix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And your thoughts echoed by many of the folks in our comments too. Lucy Yearwood saying, Inscription, what a mindfuck. Can enjoy it with it whether you love or hate card games. One of those rare occasions where I felt so lucky that I play games and have experienced such amazing pieces of art. Yeah, just like you were saying at the top, Jeremy. We also had Jay Mission saying, Inscription's my game of the year, an absolutely sublime game that consistently does thing that it can only be done in video games while telling an intense, spooky, and even heartwarming story. The best game by Daniel Mullins. He's also reached out in the past couple of days. We are maybe going to try and make that happen next year. We'll keep you updated. And then the last comment here, let's say there's a couple of them, but Michael Gray kind of rounds it up really well. Inscription, a delightfully dark surprise of deck building card game that is more than meets the eye. The only trouble in recommending it is it's hard to explain the true magic of that game without spoiling it.
Yes.
Yeah, bang on.
I think you could say that about a couple of the games maybe that are going to be talked about on today's podcast. Jesse, was that on your list? But that was on your list, was it?
It was, yeah.
Cool. Let's go with you again then, and get the ball rolling. What other game did you have on there?
Sure. So, it's funny. I didn't expect it to be the thing that would win, but watching the Game Awards and getting to the end of that, having Joseph Fares or Fares come up on stage, beautiful. I can't believe I actually agreed with the Game Awards on the Game of the Year win. That game is stellar. It's not just good.
You got to say the name of the game, man.
It's not. Hold on. It's not just good. It's amazing. It Takes Two is my favorite game of the year. No question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
Anyone else?
It's not on my list, but I did enjoy it a lot.
Also played, also not on list.
Okay, I have not played it yet. I wanted to play it with my wife, but I don't think we were in the headspace to play that game.
Yeah, that's a tough one to play with someone you're married to, I think. I feel like maybe.
Yeah, and also like I am. It's one of those games where I feel like if you are, that makes it sound like my marriage is on the rocks or something. It's more the whole idea of a kid like having the trauma of a little girl. We didn't really want to fuck with that, but also like it, this is a hard game to divorce from divorce, right? To like your own personal experience as a person, right. I have to imagine has a big impact on that type of thing. Jesse, tell us what it is about It Takes Two that got it on your list.
Right. So, I mean, what Hazelight's been doing for the last however many years has just been really fantastic co-op experiences. Even their first game, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, while it's not a co-op game that you play with somebody else, it's a co-op game that you play with yourself. It's very strange. But It Takes Two, I think, really nails something that has been missing in the game space, something that Hazelight has done really well, the studio, is making games that aren't co-op as an extra option, but are co-op in their basest level. You know, like that is what It Takes Two. It's literally the name of the game, right? Like co-op is what you need to do to play it. So what you're doing in the game is you're playing as these two characters, like Danny said, that are going through a divorce, and they get turned into these little tiny itty bitty little puppet characters that are made by their daughter as her way of like coping with their impending divorce that she doesn't really understand, but you know, that's the game, is her coming to the realization and thinking it's her and everything. It's a very sad story. But the gameplay part of it is, I think, what makes it so special, because the story is really good, but playing it's sublime. It's so good. Like, there are moments where in one instance, you're playing a game where one player, you know, it has a lot of asymmetric design, where one player is throwing a nail and the other player has a hammer and like can pull the nail out, or like can hammer the nail in and stuff. Like, it's so good like that, because there's other moments where, and it sticks out so distinctly in my mind. It is absolutely not a spoiler because it's just a gameplay thing, but it's really funny, where you're in a tree and there are squirrels fighting you, and you're riding on a bird, and suddenly you're playing a fighting game, like a 2D, 2.5D fighting game for like a minute or two. And that's something I think they really nailed there, is that nothing ever lasts too long.
Right.
Like, I played with my girlfriend, who doesn't really play a lot of video games. She has her mainstay genres. She'll stick with The Legend of Zelda. As everyone that comes out, she'll play it. She loved Pokemon Snap. But this was the first big, third person kind of adventure game that we'd played together, and it was crazy how quickly she picked up on so many of the things, as someone who doesn't play those kinds of games, and still had so much fun with it. Like, it's not just the individual moments of different things that you're doing throughout the game, like where you randomly have a goo gun. It's also, there's challenges, like little mini games that you play with your friends. And outside of specifically mechanical things, like there's a part later on where you're just in this like playhouse kind of thing, where there's a bunch of random little games and like blocks and toys that a kid would have, but there's also paint boards, and you can just paint with real paint and like make a painting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it's so cool. There's so many moments like that. There's like a piano that you play with. I think the thing for me was there's so much novelty in the game, and it's something that you do with somebody else, and it's not something you can do alone. Like, it's designed to be done with somebody else, which again is something that the industry has been missing. Co-op gaming has just like not completely, but has fallen to the wayside a lot. I mean, to the point that, Halo Infinite can launch without it. I'm sure it's coming soon. They've said it's coming soon. But
can you play this solo at all? You can't, right?
No, you can't. You can't. But when
No.
you buy the game, you get a pass that you can give to a friend, and they can join you on it.
Right.
So they don't also have to buy the $50 game. You can just buy it once and play with a buddy, and you don't have to, because that would be ridiculous, right? If they sold the game and they were like, two people have to spend $50 to play it online together. But it has local co-op, online co-op. It's fantastic. It's super good.
Anyone else have any thoughts about It Takes Two?
Yeah, the thing I really like about It Takes Two is it, like, every level they radically like shift the gameplay mechanic. Like, you're always learning something brand new, so it never gets stale. And like the setting is radically different. Like, there's one part where I think you're helping out like a bunch of bees or like chipmunks, like underground animals, and then the next you're like in a space setting.
Yeah. Oh,
And like the boss fights are really fun and like challenging, and what's also really helpful is, as a co-op game, is you're always seeing what the other person is doing. And like I like the because I played it with Audrey and we had so much fun, but it's so funny because it's like I'll have to like hold, like there'll be times where we'll want to like guide the other player, like, you should do this, hey, don't tell me what to do, and it mimics the exact same thing that the characters are doing in the game. And it's like, I feel like the writing is really authentic. A lot of times with like games, like, I don't know, I'll get kind of annoyed with the writing if they're trying to be funny, if it doesn't land. But I think like Joseph Fares and his team, like, it's like, I would even say the story of the game is like Pixar level, where it's really inventive and they nail it. Like, it's great for adults, and I will say, I think it's funny the game won Best Family Game at the Game Awards, because the game is actually pretty dark and somber.
Very.
But I feel like it like also scratches the same inventiveness as like I don't know, like peak platforming games. Like there's parts of the game that remind me of like Conker's Bad Fur Day, where it's like, oh, this is pretty crass and fun. But then that space thing is like Super Mario Galaxy. It's so wild, so playful. There's a mechanic where you can like be a giant or be really tiny. So I think one character's a giant, one person's really tiny, and you have to work together. And it's like, and I still haven't beaten the game, but yeah, I really loved it.
Nice. Frank, sorry, Jeremy, you also jumped in there.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Jesse was saying. I think that there needs to be more games that are designed from the ground up as co-op experiences instead of having them as kind of like an afterthought and the game has to like balance around it, or it like there are certain games that get too easy if you co-op them because it's just the single player experience with two people playing it. But yeah, It Takes Two did a fantastic job of that. And the other thing I thought it did really well was I think any game like that is continually like moving from one sort of mini experience to the next and like constantly changing mechanics. For me personally, I sometimes a game will like break down and like the immersion breaks for me, and I'm like, oh, I'm playing a bunch of like Mario Party mini games in succession, and I thought this game did a really good job of tying them together kind of like narratively, like the context, the diegesis of like giving you these tools in the world that are like, you know, a hammer and nail because you're tiny little puppet people, or like things like that. It contextualizes the things that you're doing and these new mechanics as it introduces them in a way where it doesn't feel like it's just like, all right, you know, like now it's chance time and everyone rolls the dice. Like it felt like it was yeah, it just like it felt like a very cohesive experience despite having like whatever dozens and dozens of little mini experiences in it.
Nice one. Yeah, your love of It Takes Two reflected in our patrons as well. Obscura says, the only time I've had so much fun in a co-op game was during Portal 2. So, you know, that's some pretty high praise. Steve Maxey saying, my partner and I had a blast playing it. As so many different domains with different video game characters. Yes, the Book of Love is a terrible character that I wanted to boot into oblivion, but it was really the only significant flaw in a glitch-free game full of humor, delight, invention, and heart. Let's do a temperature check on Book of Love. I've only played like the first maybe 40 minutes of that game, and I found him hilarious. Are we pro Book of Love, anti Book of Love? Jesse, first of all,
You know what? He's very funny at the start, and I get why you liked him in the first 40. But by the end of it, I was like, shut up. I get the joke. It's very funny how you are angry and loud. Like, okay, but like that's pretty good.
That's a pretty good Hakeem.
Yeah, I actually am Hakeem. Did you? No. It was fantastic. I love the character. Great time for the first 3 hours. After that, I was like, okay, all right, that's enough.
Jeremy?
I really enjoyed Hakeem. The only thing about the tone of the characters and story in this game is that I thought, like Frank said, it did kind of like a Conker's Bad Fur Day thing sometimes and a Pixar thing sometimes. But it felt a little bit to me like Dr. Hakeem was kind of like an example of this. It felt a little torn between those two tones. Like there were moments where it was like, oh, this is like a game where it's like joking about being a kid's game, but actually it's very mature. And then there was other times where it was like, oh no, this is a game for kids. But I'm pro Dr. Hakeem.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, I do like it, and I think it's because the characters always have a response back to him where they're kind of annoyed, and so I feel like you get both, where it's like he can be really funny and silly, but then the characters also say "shut the fuck up" to him, and it's like, okay, it works well. But I do like it. Also, I think doesn't Joseph Fares do the voice acting for Dr. Hakeem, right?
I think he did the mocap. I don't know about the voice though.
Mocap. God.
Yeah.
The Book of Love. Jesus. Dennis, what's you played a bit of it, you said. Do you remember the
I
Book
got through
of Love?
most of it. I think he was maybe the most compelling character, oddly enough.
Same.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was frustrating, so it's maybe not and I like this game, so I don't want to just be too negative, and I don't want to be getting into that like super big backlash the other way because it's so popular. But
Right.
yeah, the other characters kind of just frustrated me the entire time, and kind of by the end I wasn't really rooting for them. Other than the daughter, of course, she was innocent in all of this, but yeah, everyone else just kind of grated on me. So
Fair.
There you go. All right. It Takes Two is part of the Noclip 2021 Game of the Year canon. Okay, this loops back around to me, and I'm very conscious of the fact that last time around I scooped up one that was a bunch of other people's as well. So I'm going to jump over the next one I had, which I think other people might, I'm not sure, and go for one that I am absolutely shocked I am saying is on my top like 3 games of the year. I did not for one moment when I started this game think that I would be putting Resident Evil Village on my game of the year list. Does anyone else have it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Frank has it. Man, Resident Evil Village. So I guess like I didn't really play. What was it? 7, I guess was the one before this. I played a bit of it. Did the VR thing. I've been off the boil on Resident Evil for a long time. I played 5, 6 was a nightmare. 7 was not for me, but I saw that they'd done some interesting stuff in it. And also like Resident Evil is just one of those franchises that like, you know, the first one was so hokey and great, and then the second one was great, but like was kind of taking itself seriously, and then by Nemesis it's like actually taking itself seriously, and it's, you know, it's trying to build this world, and kind of like the movies, it just becomes this top heavy like fucking world of characters that you have to bring in from the old games, and it has to have zombies in it, and it has to have this, and Resident Evil Village just does not give a fuck about anything that's happened in Resident Evil before. And also, if it introduces old characters, doesn't give a fuck how it treats them. It's just, it's created an entire... It also created like one of the least self-serious games I have ever played. And I think going into this experience, you know, thinking about Resident Evil and like what it's going to be about, and it's going to all the umbrella, and they'll talk about this, and it'll somehow be connected to this. And then when you get into the game, and like the baddies you're fighting are like a freakishly tall woman. Her like I don't want to. I'm not going to spoil anything. Just all of the characters that they introduce that are like the baddies, the 4 baddies in the 4 zones that you basically can choose which order you kind of go in a little bit and like fight them. They're just like this dysfunctional family of absolute fucking freaks. Like they're just like why are you a family? All of you hate each other. You're all like so scary and weird. Like one of them's this little doll. One of them's this like dude with a massive hammer who doesn't seem to like anyone. And they're all like, they're having like familial drama while the story plays out. And then I won't spoil what the actual like point of the game is, but when you realize what you're actually doing, when you realize the reason why you're going to these bosses to collect these things, when you realize what that thing is, it is like maybe the sickest fucking thing I have ever heard in a video game. And your character's reaction to everything that happens, whatever his name is, what is it, Ethan or something? Ethan Winters?
Yeah.
They have basically like intentionally made the dumbest motherfucker in the world. He is like such a blank slate. All of this stuff is happening to him, and he's like equally freaking out all the time because he keeps getting like limbs cut off and shit, and like just like weird stuff keeps happening to him. And also just along for the ride, like he's just such a dumb fuck, and you get to play him, and he becomes a character in the game, you know, this just everyman idiot who's like stuck in this absolutely absurd scenario and then is forced to do something horrific. It's like you know, movies like Saw and stuff, right, where you have this person who's like out of water and is thrust into this situation where it's just so barbaric and weird and messed up and they can't escape it. And that's what he's in for like 15 hours or whatever, and it's just so well done. The gameplay is brilliant. The humor in the game, the pacing of it, like it never outstays its welcome. Each boss fight is its own thing. Some of them are scarier than others. It's fucking brilliant. And I like from start to finish, when it ended, I had such a smile on my face because I could not believe how good that game was. Frank, I rambled. What are your feelings on Village?
Yeah, so with Resident Evil is like one of my all-time favorite franchises, and so some of the entries are hit or miss, but the last few with like Resident Evil 2 Remake, Nemesis, and now Village, it's like, oh my gosh, like Village is so good. It was also a game I like started a new game plus immediately after. It rules. They started this in like Resident Evil 7, but I love what they do now of like each quarter of the game is also like significantly different than the last. Like they pick like kind of a new like subgenre of horror to go down, and like there's even one that is like doesn't have combat in it that's done so well. And it's, man, I don't know if it's like maybe an 18-20 hour game. I forget how long it was, but I didn't get tired of it because they kept evolving like the locale, and like my favorite thing in these games which they introduced, like with Resident Evil 4, is like you can upgrade. There's a different merchant who has this big fat gut out that's just so silly. Again, the tone, yeah, the Duke. This like, oh my gosh, this blob.
He's
hanging
got like he's just a huge baby with an English accent. Like this game doesn't care. It's so good.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, I love being able to upgrade your items, sell stuff off, like hunting for collectibles. The setting of it is really cool. Like all the teasers, I didn't know what to expect. But I love that there's vampires, werewolves, and all this stuff, like just beyond zombies. And then like the very end of the game, they bring something else in that's just insane. Like it keeps blowing. The scale of it gets so crazy. Like there's a section that straight up just feels like Call of Duty. Like it's so good. And then even the ending, like as someone who actually bites into all of the lore and the crazy world building, the very ending, how they tip off what might happen in future Resident Evils. It's like, yes, let's go. I want one every single year. But yeah, this actually was like my favorite game of the year. It was just like, oh yeah, Resident Evil Village was so great. I'll be excited to play the next one. I even really love Nemesis Remake, but this one it was spectacular.
Yeah, all of the directing of all of these characters, they were so unique and interesting. Like, yeah, and it's difficult, right? Because they have the what are you buying guy from Resident Evil 4 is like well known, and then they make basically that guy for Duke. He like even knows that guy. I think he references him at one point, and the Duke is like the funniest dude because he's just like, in the same way, you often have these characters in Resident Evil that are like disconnected from the antagonists. Like they're in the world, but they're not getting attacked for some reason. So they're sort of just like bystanders to the nonsense that's happening. And like he basically played like a sort of a straw man or like a weird mirror to like just remind you how insane everything is all the time. You turn up to him after doing something and he's like, whoa, well that was very interesting. It was. And like the Moreau, like you said, like the trailers made it look like it all happened in a very sort of Resident Evil 4 village, and then a mansion which looked like one. But then, or I guess the mansion kind of looked like some sort of fantastical castle or something. But then there is an area that looks like one, and there is an area that's like a different way. There's like a industrial area and a swamp, and like you said, they all feel like their own weird version of like one is a very sort of small house horror show, and then another one is like a sort of a body horror weird mechanical area, and then another and then by the time they like introduce like a straight up what feels like you said, a Call of Duty mission at one stage, you're just like, I'll do anything you do, game. There was never a moment in the thing where I felt bored or like the pace dropped. It's nuts. I would never in a million years recommend like a Resident Evil game to just about anyone. I would recommend this game to just about anyone. It is so stupidly brilliant, and it is bizarre to me that it has Resident Evil in the name, and that's just, I have nothing against Resident Evil. I love those first two games, and I love 4, and I had time for some of the other ones, and I should have played more 7, but like 7 was a game I wanted to like, you know what I mean? Like I played it being like, I know this is important and good, and people said it's really good, and it's a little bit too scary for me. The other thing to say about Resident Evil Village is it's not doing the scary stuff like 7 did. Like I think there's one level in 8 that freaks some people out quite a lot. But like, yeah, Frank, did you get that feeling too? Like it's like 7 was a scary game, but like, and I think I got halfway through it, but like 8's not really scary.
Yeah, Resident Evil so 7 was kind of the reboot after like the disaster of 6, and it felt like with 7 they brought it back to its roots of like Resident Evil 1 survival horror, like you're scrounging for resources, you're terrified. Resident Evil Village felt like their kind of reboot of Resident Evil 4, which is run and gun action, running through like a city, like and so it's way more action oriented. So like you're still doing collecting stuff, but it encourages you to go kick ass. And so it's definitely a different vibe than 7.
Yeah. We got a couple of patrons also jumping in on it. Simon Whaler says, haven't played many new releases this year, but Resident Evil Village stands out for me especially. I love the remake of 7. I love the remakes and 7, and I feel like Village built wonderfully on the strengths of those. Cool characters and bosses, interesting and atmospheric world design, good difficulty balance for both puzzles and combat. Just a really solid traditional single-player experience overall. And I'm going to skip that last part because it's a little bit spoilery. Bob Stouffer also shouting it out. Willem says Resident Evil Village, a confident, eccentric game that doesn't stretch out its content and plays entirely by its own rules. That's really well said. I think I'll end on that one. Yeah, it is the most eccentric game I have played in a long time, and I'm definitely going to go play it again. It's fucking brilliant. Dennis, you're next up.
Okay, so Valheim gone. I didn't speak up when Jeremy and Jesse were speaking about Inscription, but that was number 2 on my list. I had nothing more to add on top of what the guy said. Absolutely nailed it. So the last, hopefully I'm going to gazump some of you here. It's Death's Door.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Cliffhanger.
the pause. Yeah, absolutely love this game. It's kind of perfect for me. It's I waited for the Switch version because I kind of wanted a Switch title. I kind of had my Switch sitting here nearly all year not being played, and I want something that I can pick up. I got a dog. I lie on the couch now a lot more than I used to. Just kind of sit there and need something to do. Tonally, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful in pretty much all aspects. It's that classic, like, simple to get to grips with, borderline impossible to ever truly master. It's hard. It's never unfair. It launches you into it. It's not boring. It just gets you straight in. You're kind of definitely spoiler freaks. Like, first minute, you're kind of into a mini boss while you're just learning the ropes. But it's not unfair. It's not trying to crush your spirits. So I just have had an absolute ball playing it. And it's an end of the year, so maybe it's a recency bias thing. But yeah, I've adored Death's Door, and I would hope or think that this might be on a few other lists here.
Yeah, who else we got? Jeremy did a documentary on it, so I'm wondering if it made his.
I was very torn. It basically is like tied with a couple entries on my list. The only reason it didn't end up on my list is because it's most of pretty much everything on my list, in fact, is something that does something like totally new with its game design. Whereas I think Death's Door deserves all the praise in the world for being like it just takes like a very tried and true formula and recombines some of those elements and does it in such a perfect way. I absolutely love Death's Door. It's not on my list, but it's one of my favorite. If I had one more entry, it would be that.
Yeah. It was in the running for me for like the same type of thing. I don't think it was 4, but it was certainly in there. And I hear what you're saying, Jeremy. Like, what types of games are you thinking about? Like stuff like Hollow Knight, or like, I know it's a little bit Soulsborne-y, but it obviously plays a lot differently.
I think it takes a lot of what made the old 2D Zelda games great, but then like if I ever go back and play like Link to the Past, which I have many times, it feels like the combat feels dated. Like it was very fun at the time, but it doesn't feel like it holds up as well. And I think Death's Door takes that sort of like top-down action, turns it isometric, and then adds in kind of like the Souls games loop, where it's about these short to mid-length sections of the game that have varying difficulty, and it's kind of about doing them like over and over and over until you gain mastery of these kind of like short, intense segments of gameplay. And I thought it just like it did what it did incredibly well, and it was just like a really, really tight, fun game that nailed everything it tried to do.
Whitefire in the Patreon comments said, Death's Door has been my favorite game of 2021. Engaging gameplay, gorgeous stylized art, moving music that matched the tone of the game just right, and a well-paced narrative that comes across clearly despite the amount of text and dialogue in the game. All in all, charming, well-rounded experience that doesn't overstay its welcome. Yeah, what did you make of that side of it, Dennis? The narrative, the sort of, the light touch narrative, but the themes of death and all the characters. I can picture that little old weird granny in my head whenever I think about that game. I know she's right on the box art as well. But yeah, what did you make of all that stuff?
So that's maybe what jumps this up the list for me, is that I'm maybe a little bit of a mark and maybe a soft touch for this sort of thing. So this kind of like place that I just want to be in, and to be literally, I don't know if it's the correct analogy, but likeness, but going back to games like Flower on the PS3, I just kind of wanted to soak that in and could kind of do so infinitely. I felt this was kind of the same, like straight away, the fact that I was just playing this little crow who just was rendered so beautifully, and I could just watch this character walk around with a little red glowing sword for days on end. Now, I didn't have this short enough game, but I think I think its actual tone, its darkness, was what captured it for me. I think it's fair to say that maybe it didn't reinvent the wheel. But no, for me, it was a triumph of simple storytelling and characterization, and then this world that I just thought was beautiful and that I could just soak it in for hours on end.
Yeah, we need a word for that. Whatever that thing is, right? There are certain games where you just like being in that spot is not enough, but it's a big part of it. And if I look at your list now, we've Valheim, Inscription, and Death's Door, and those are all games that are just really nice to soak up, right? To just be in.
Completely. My wild card later is, I think, quite different. So maybe that'll be a more interesting segue.
A game you hate.
Kinda, yeah, kind of.
Oh, okay. Now I'm interested. We'll have to come back around. Frank, your next one, whatever it is, what you got?
Yeah, so I don't know if this one would count, but it's definitely an ongoing game for this year. It was also the first year that I really got into this game, but I do want to say my piece on it. Cool. The game I played above everything else this year, I have over 250 hours. Is Fortnite.
Nice.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yes. And
Wild card.
Yeah. Well,
I've heard of this one.
It was definitely the game that like my group of friends and even like with streaming that we fell into because of the pandemic. Like it was like we have all of a sudden this time stop. We have all this infinite time. Let's explore stuff we would have never touched, and we started going down a massive list of weird games.
Right.
Fortnite was something that clicked. One is just the insanity of licensing that game does. Like what got me into Fortnite was like December 2020 at the Game Awards last year, they announced Master Chief. And it's like, wait, this is coming in Fortnite? All right, I'm going to check this out. And then like next month, January, I think they added Kratos from God of War. Then they added like Ryu, Chun-Li, and now there's Resident Evil characters. And like every month they kept announcing more and more silly stuff like Terminator, Predator. And all of a sudden it felt like, wait a minute, Fortnite is now specifically marketing to me. Like what's going on? And so all my friends started playing it. But what made the game so magical is like anyone can play on any platform, not counting mobile, but like Switch, PC, PlayStation, Xbox. So if any of our friends wanted to play, they could download it and play with us. And it's like when PUBG came out. Like it really was like, oh, this game mode is generally super fun. What makes Fortnite so fun to play is it's so funny, maybe unintentionally, but I love the clash of like. You really can be Master Chief doing like playing with Ariana Grande, playing with Chris Redfield, and everyone's doing Gangnam Style. It's just it's so crazy, and I think like I don't know. It's something that we played every single week, almost daily, when we just wanted to hang out with our friends. And it became like a virtual chat room. Like we're still playing, we're collecting loot, we're shooting people. I also feel like when I play with my friends, like we're mostly in our 30s, in our 20s. So it's like, oh, it feels like we're kind of just like noob stomping when we drop in and like, but it's so fun. And like the thrill of getting a victory royale really is like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Let's go again. But what makes Fortnite so cool, and the reason why I actually do consider it is, they really do evolve. Like every 3 months they put out a new season, and they will radically change like the weapons, the equipments on the map. That they just completely changed the map, so now it's all new. They also upgraded to Unreal 5. But my favorite like era of Fortnite was the summer season. They introduced like aliens. So all of a sudden everyone was so used to like the flow of Fortnite with vehicles, and then they added giant UFOs that could just shoot lasers. So for that summer in Fortnite, it was so chaotic where it was basically whatever team got a UFO would win. So you could carjack UFOs from other players, lift them up through like the UFO ray, fling them across the map into like the storm. You could also do that to your teammates. And it was just like, and it's something I still play like often with my friends. And I spent so much money on stupid vanity cosmetics.
They got you.
But it's really great, and I'm surprised that it got me. But if playing Fortnite feels like going to the mall, like you see what's in stock at like Hot Topic, or like, oh, what are the kids into these days? Like, and they're always playing like new music, and like I'm exposed to like TikTok memes and stuff through the world of Fortnite, and the fact that anyone can just immediately download, play, jump in. It's I don't know. It is a really charming game that I generally love to play.
Nice. Yeah, it's valid. It's a big one. It's one that I wish I'm still waiting for my gateway into it. I have like 40 hours in the version they took down. So maybe that just shows you how much I really wanted to play a game like Valheim. Was there anyone else who's like had much experience with Fortnite at all, like this year or previously?
Unfortunately, no. Although I do think I shouldn't be surprised that Frank would be into it after we were talking about the Ghostface Killer costume for Call of Duty Warzone and how you and your buddies got all that. I should have been like, yeah, of course he's playing the game where you can do Sasuke and Naruto running around, doing dabs and stuff. That makes perfect sense.
Awesome. Fortnite, yeah, a worthy addition for sure. Frank, we're going to come back around to you in a second because the other lists are getting full up. Jeremy, what do you got for your number 2 or whatever, your next one?
Okay, so this is the game that I stayed up way too late last night playing. I knew it was a short game, so I saved it for yesterday, and then I ended up starting it around dinner time, and then just kept going until it was irresponsibly late. I finally got around to playing a game that our documentary is dropping for today, The Forgotten City.
Hell yeah.
Holy shit. This game is fantastic.
Can I just say, this is very funny, because last week when we were filming, I was like, these are 2 games that are like 100% Jeremy games.
Yeah. And they're both on my list. That and Inscription I've only played in the last week, and like both of them. It's funny. Sometimes I do this thing where like they're both games that I've had in my Steam library for a while. Like I bought Forgotten City a while ago. I think when I'm excited to play a game, I do this with like movies and TV sometimes too. If there's something that I know I'm gonna like, sometimes I'll put off consuming it because I'm like, I want to be in the right headspace because I know I'm going to appreciate this. And Forgotten City was one of those. It is such a good game. I mentioned earlier that like all of the games on my list, I feel like do something novel with their game design. And what Forgotten City does is it takes this aspect of games like Divinity Original Sin and Disco Elysium that I really like, and it does it in a totally different way with a different presentation because it's first person instead of like isometric or top down like a CRPG. But what it does is it creates this it's like a playground in which you can do social role playing, and I think that this is something that I at least I hope that is going to become a more prominent aspect of games, because I think it's something that's really, really difficult to do because we don't have like AI that can simulate having a really in-depth conversation with you. And so in order to, to simulate like shooting somebody or whatever, like it's pretty well established because there's not that many moving parts. There's the gun, it shoots the thing, it either hits or it doesn't hit, and the guy dies or he doesn't die. But with social role playing, it's kind of like you could, if you could type in any response, it would break down the illusion of it. But it's this balance of giving the player enough inputs and the inputs that they would want to say to these characters, but not giving them so much that it's like, well, I'm not going to sit here and click through like 40 dialogue options with every character, because then you get bored and it's like it's not immersive. So what Forgotten City does really well is it's a small, kind of like very dense world, which is something that Divinity Original Sin 2 did really well, where it's like the map in DOS 2 is like, it's not huge, but because everything in it is meaningful, it feels way, way bigger than it is, because it's incredibly dense with information and with like meaningful information. Like it's not like sometimes I'll play a game that feels really big and empty, and it's like, oh, I found like a dish, but I feel like everything in these games that I'm describing, especially Forgotten City, is like everything feels like it's part of the puzzle. And also something that I think Forgotten City does really well is that it reuses its elements in clever ways, where it's kind of like in a totally different way than Inscription, but in a similar vein. It keeps pulling back these veils of information, and it reveals to you more about the world, and then it allows itself to kind of like reinvent the role of different characters or elements of the world. So you're constantly doing this thing where you're like, oh yeah, that's like just so and so, like he's this guy, and then you learn a little bit more about the world, and you have to go revisit that character. And so instead of this thing where like it doesn't rely on like the traversal being super fun or like having great like combat or anything, the thing that's driving you to go back and talk to people again, and the thing that makes it not feel like a chore, is just from the get-go, it respects your time and it invests the player with a legitimate level of like curiosity about the world, so that you're constantly like, I'm investigating. You're not like, oh, I have to walk all the way over to this guy. You're like, oh, I can't wait to go see so and so because I want to ask him more about this thing that I just learned.
Yeah, it does a good job of making sure that you're not just stuck on one path. There's other people you can talk to that will also maybe, who knows, reveal that. Does anyone else have the Forgotten City on their list? No one else. Okay, cool. Has anyone else played the Forgotten City?
Yeah, I will say, like, because I did the gameplay capture for the documentary, and that was one, like, going into the assignment, it was like, yeah, sure, I'll check this out. And then, yeah, I think by day one, it was like, this is cool. So that the whole week I was playing it, was like, oh, this is amazing. And I will say the writing did hook me to where, like, I actually wanted to study the civilization. I started listening to a podcast on ancient civilizations.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was like, oh, this is, like, it felt like I was in a college course of like, oh, I'm learning while I'm playing. This is cool. And then, yeah, I like how Jeremy said, like, you don't feel chained to, like, one quest. Like, every time you speak to somebody, you're gaining more knowledge about the world, and like you're using like information as power in the game to like manipulate people and get what you want. Like it really surprised me, and I like playing it.
Yeah, this may have been my number 4. I had not played much of it until last week. Basically, once the doc was edited and done, and Jake had handed it over, and I had edited a bunch of it, and we made sure it's like spoiler free and stuff, and it's currently waiting to be published behind me here, so hopefully it'll go up today. I did the same thing as you, Jeremy. I spent, I think it was Friday night, just mainlining the game. I didn't get to bed until 2 or something. It was really stupid. It does. It's for, I guess we haven't explained what it is. It's a game where you are essentially just trying to solve a problem. It is a non-combat first-person game. It used to be a Skyrim mod. The Forgotten City is basically a commercial version of this Skyrim mod that I won't spoil the story of how it was made, but it was made by basically one guy who'd never made a game before. Who is a big like Roman history nerd, and made this game set in a Roman town where you have to figure out. It's a Roman town that has a curse or something on it that says if anyone commits a crime, everyone in the city will die, and they think someone's going to commit a crime that day, and you have to figure out who it is. And there sort of is the starting point for a whole adventure of talking to people, and really, interesting. A lot of philosophical thought and conversation going into it. What did you make of all that, Jeremy? Because like it's a game that like I think you can play if you don't care about, like, I don't know anything about Rome. I haven't read a philosophy book since I was a teenager. But like it's a fun game to play, but it also does get into the weeds. Like certainly near the end, it gets into the weeds on philosophy and certainly religion and the role of religion and how it's interpreted and how it's passed on and all that sort of stuff. There's one conversation in the game which is deeply philosophical, which I was thinking, Jeremy would love this particular conversation, I bet. What did you make of all those elements?
Yeah, there's a guy who literally is just like, can I engage you in a Socratic dialogue? Which is like, I laughed so hard because that's like something me and my friend joke about, is like a guy who's too into philosophy who keeps like trying to like goes to the cafe and is like, do you have time for a quick Socratic dialogue? It is interesting because there's a genre of fiction where like morality plays where or like fables where storytelling is used to kind of like demonstrate a morality or like to impart like wisdom about some sort of like, or whether it's like a morality thing or like just a struggle of being a human or whatever. I thought that this game did a really good job of kind of like putting meat on the bones of the platitude of, like, this isn't a spoiler at all, but like the curse they refer to as the golden rule. And so it's kind of like about like what if someone like sins or like breaks the golden rule, that's the thing that dooms everybody. And so part of the game is also about like investigating morality and like it's about like testing the rules of the world, which in essence, like, that's part of the fun of any game, is like you're testing the boundaries of this world. And that's the reason I like immersive sims, is because you're constantly like, oh, can I do this? Can I go through this? Can I like turn into this? And I think that whereas like something like Prey does more of like a physics based approach to that, where you're like, can I turn into like a mug and roll through this little gap or whatever? I think that the Forgotten City does it in kind of like a more abstract social sense. And this gets at something that I wanted to mention about loop games in general, of which there were a lot this year. I think that loop games, the reason that they are having kind of like a renaissance and becoming more common is I think that they are, in essence, a recognition of the structure of games as a medium, which is that you are like the way I think about it is kind of like a Souls game. There are like these sections of the game where it's like I got to fight this guy, and then I get to the boss and have to do these series of things to kill him. And essentially, the way you play a Souls game is you master that little loop. You go, you die, you learn something, you come back, you go, you die, and in essence, like each little stretch of a Souls game is kind of like a loop game where you're doing it over and over until you achieve mastery.
Right.
And that's what I enjoy about Souls games is like that achieving that mechanical mastery. But the thing that loop games do is that and like Forgotten City does this. I won't get ahead of myself because I want to talk about this with my next entry too. But they are essentially, they're doing the same thing, but instead of chunking it up like a Souls game where there's like little sections that you're mastering and then moving on to the next loop, the entire game is the loop. And so essentially what you're doing is instead of having this little section to master, you're trying to loop through the entire game, this complex like system of systems, and you're trying to understand and like untie this knot. And so every time you're going through, you're increasing your level of mastery for this like giant puzzle box. And that's what I really enjoy about loop games is I think they understand, whether it's like consciously or unconsciously, they understand what makes games enjoyable to play, and it's achieving mastery of complex systems. But this does it instead of a segment, it's the whole thing in totality.
The one thing I never mastered in the Forgotten City was fucking that thing you swing on the rope. I think I got the flower eventually, but Jesus Christ, it took me like 30 times. I don't even need to do that. Did you get the flower?
No, I don't even know. I haven't gotten every ending. I've gotten 2 out of 4, so maybe I missed that.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. There are 4 different endings in this game as well. Well, it's a Galeas, whatever is the guy at the top.
Yeah.
He asks you to collect a flower. That's you don't even need to do it for any of the endings, but he asks you to collect a flower for him, and it's on an island that you fly over on that little sort of zip line thing, but you have to like time it to land on it, and it took me like no joke 50 attempts to do.
Oh my god, I didn't even do that.
Yeah, I think that might be an achievement. It's real good. Woogleboo says, The Forgotten City, I absolutely loved how the game surprised you constantly. Reminded me of The Outer Wilds back in 2019. Story was unique and the game had strong humor. It did. It was like funny in parts as well. Yeah, really, really strong game. I'm interested in the fact that you have another loop game for your worthy mention wildcard or whatever we're going to call it. I'm interested as well because there are 3 games that have loops in them that haven't come up yet that I'm interested to see if they come up. So let's pass it over to Jesse for your third one. Is it a loop game?
You know, it's so funny you say that because it is.
Which one?
It's Deathloop.
Oh, nice one. Okay,
Hell yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, Jeremy, was that your next one?
That is my next one, yeah.
I had a feeling.
Oh, wow.
I had a feeling. I just could tell from the way you were talking about things. Because you know what? I feel like you're staring at my screen. You're saying all the stuff that I'm thinking about so many things. This is crazy. Yeah, Deathloop. I mean, obviously, one of the best games of the year. I feel like even if you don't like it, it's still, you could observe it as like this very pivotal, great thing from Arcane. I love everything Arcane has done. Their whole back catalog is fantastic. The Dishonored games, all 3 of them, I think are some of the best I've ever played. Prey's fantastic. I unfortunately haven't touched the Moon Crash DLC, which after playing this, I feel like I'm supposed to play Moon Crash. So it's definitely on my list. But yeah, I really like Deathloop for a handful of reasons. I think it's not just good at what it does, like as a loop game. Like, I don't want to repeat what Jeremy said because he said everything I was going to say about the loop aspect of it, which is so funny. But just like the environment design, I think is something that I've always really loved about Arcane's games, right? They have fantastic levels. Sorry, did anyone else have this on their list, by the way, other than Jeremy?
It's a super game. I absolutely adored it. But yeah, it was one of the, it might be 5.
That's fair. Yeah, I've always loved the environment design of Arcane games. I think they have like great levels. You know, Clockwork Mansion, I think, is my favorite level of any video game ever, from Dishonored 2. Dishonored 1 has great levels as well. But this one, I felt like the world and the way that it changed over time in the different times of day are just so good, like just so immaculate. They give you so many opportunities to like see how things change over time and to learn the order in which you need to do certain things. Like, again, I don't want to repeat Jeremy too much, but the aspect of looping games that is so fun is that you learn that mastery. You learn how to perfectly pull everything off, right? And when you go into the levels and you know where each individual character is going to be, where you know where every item's going to be the time you loop around, that stuff, it's beautiful. That's what video games are all about, baby. When you're pulling it off and you're popping heads and you're not even thinking about it and you get where you need to go and nobody even sees you, that's when you know you're playing like a master. Like you're not playing the game anymore, you know? You're on a whole different level. You're like astral projecting above the game.
Yeah, one of the things as well, which was great to be recognized at the Game Awards, and obviously we have priors with a bunch of these folks. We had Dinga Bakaba on our actually on the channel. We had him doing a little breakdown of Deathloop, but obviously we've interviewed himself and Sebastien Metton for a bunch of stuff when we filmed our last thing we filmed before COVID. But Sebastien won Best Art Direction for that game, and like that game is like maybe one of the best looking, and like, but I shouldn't say looking, but again, that sort of element of what you call production design in film, like just the setting, the world, the color scheme, the characterization of people, the silhouetting, all that stuff is just, it's so slick. You can tell they've made these games before, even though this is definitely a departure for them too, right?
Yeah, it's a huge swing away from the typical Arcane kind of thing. It's something I actually was disappointed with at the start until I accepted that it was that kind of game. Because when you played Dishonored 1 and 2 and Death of the Outsider, the goal for me was always Ghost. I did not want to kill anyone. I didn't want to do any action stuff. I was always trying to be as invisible as possible. But in this one, obviously, it's very action heavy. You can tell that from the trailers right away. It's all about big guns, cool guns. That's something I really loved as well, was just how different some of the guns are, especially the orange highest rarity ones that you can find, the legendaries. Those are fantastic, like the snipers and everything. Really good stuff. But yeah, it's a huge swing away from their traditional kind of design philosophy in terms of like gameplay, where you can play any way, where this is like you're always playing chaos. You're always going crazy. You're always doing a bunch of random things, blowing stuff up. And once I accepted it as that, instead of trying to make it the game I wanted it to be, that was when it became my favorite game. When it was like, this is a game where you're trying to be chaotic. You're trying to blow stuff up. You're trying to have a good time. And the consequences is that you have to go back, and you have to go back anyways, because the loop nature of the game and the way that information is kind of slowly doled out to you, you have to go to different areas at different times, because there's four different districts and 4 different times that you can go to them. And each one, there's different things going on at different times of the day. So if you die in the evening in
Updam.
Updam, yeah, like great names. I've always loved the names for things in Arcane's games. But if you die in Updam and you got to go back to Fristad Rock in the morning or something, right? Like, that's fine. It's okay if you died in the afternoon or something. It's not a big deal, because it's okay. You'll go back. There's something else to find. As you get to the end of the game, it can get a little bit frustrating, the loop aspect of it, because, if you die, you got to go back. If you're rushing, especially, and you don't know everything, it can get a little, but that is not even remotely a problem, I found, because as soon as you go back, whatever, you just get to blow stuff up in a faster fashion and try things in a different way. And like you were saying with the production design, I think it's not just the world. It's not just the music, which is fantastic. It's not just the graphics that you find around the world, like the posters and stuff. It's also the cutscenes. Like, they're so short, but it's like a treat, It's like a reward that you get at the end of every cool revelation. It's not just the information that the game's giving you. It's also giving you this really beautiful thing to look at, of like this really cool 2D animation that they do randomly. So many parts of that game are just so well put together. Love it.
Yeah, interesting to hear you say you went loud, because I actually did play that game relatively stealthy. I think one of the things that it does really well, which also Hitman does really well, but also games like Dishonored sort of suffered from, is that the idea that you can go, if you get caught, then stuff gets chaotic for a while, but it doesn't make the entire level like chaotic. It only sort of like keeps it relatively small, so that people kind of like chill out after a while, and you can continue to attempt to be stealthy if you want, or you can just kind of rush through it. Jeremy, you said this was on your list as well, is that right?
Yeah, I think Jesse nailed it. But the only thing I want to add is that I have this weird mental block with games where no matter how much I love a game, no matter how perfect it is, and no matter how many different like ways to play a game there are, it is very difficult for me to force myself to replay a level of anything. For whatever reason, there's a part of my brain that's like, you're wasting time. You already did this. It's like, it doesn't matter if there's another way to do it. And so that has always been a hang up of mine with like with Dishonored 2. There were so many levels that have so many different ways to approach them. But for me personally, the way my brain works, it's hard for me to justify going back and replaying a level. Like for me, like the canonical way is the way that I did it the first time or something like that. And so what I think Deathloop does really well is give you a like an in-world immersed diegetic reason to revisit the complex like puzzle box levels with multiple different approaches, and it does it in a way where you're not like the cognitive wrapper for it isn't, oh, me as a video game player is going back to have a different experience. The cognitive wrapper is me as Colt is going back because I'm time looping and I need to do this and it's important. And I think the other reason that that's important is not only to give yourself a different experience of the world or of these levels and like kind of like see all that they have to offer, but it's also that there's a narrative information peppered throughout the world. And so in doing so, you're not only rewarded with like a different type of gameplay experience, but you're also gathering information that enriches your understanding of the world. And that's codified in this kind of like Outer Wilds style, like pinboard, like putting clues together system that the game has. And so I just thought it was like, I loved the Dishonored games, but Deathloop took a lot of what I loved about those games and like tweaked it in the right ways, like you said about the stealth stuff. Like you're not punished for going loud, and it's not, the whole level isn't like thrown into chaos permanently when you go loud. So yeah, I don't know. I just like Deathloop. It felt like it innovated in ways that I thought were risky for a game with such prestige behind it and from such a large studio. Whereas like something like Outer Wilds or Forgotten City, they're kind of like these nimble, smaller teams and smaller games. And so if they take risks, there's less on there's obviously a lot at stake for the people making those games, but there's less at stake than something like an Arcane Leon, where they have such a large team and a reputation to uphold. And so to see like a studio of that size and that like level of prestige taking such innovative risks is really refreshing, and I just loved that.
Yeah, well said. Deathloop, a worthy addition, and it's coming down to it. We've only got, I think, am I right in saying that Dennis, Jeremy, and Jesse, you have put forth your first three? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Frank, you have one left.
There's a game I do want to nominate. Yeah.
Okay, hold on to it for 1 sec, because I'm going to do mine and we'll loop back over, because I'm wondering if this is going to come up in some weird way. And while we're on the topic of loop games, and I'm not going to take very long on this because I basically can't talk about it, but my third game is the DLC for Outer Wilds, Echoes of the Eye, which, Outer Wilds... if we had done this in 2019, I'm sure it would have been on many of our Games of the Year lists. We did a big documentary on it back in the start of 2020. It's one of our most watched videos over the past couple of years, and that game is one of the most special games that's come out. I wasn't expecting a DLC for this game. I wasn't sure what to expect from a DLC for a game that is essentially like sort of, I don't want to say perfect, but it is singular. Like it's hard to tack something into it. And the way in which they do it is interesting, but the scale of the DLC the one thing I'll say about Echoes of the Eye, because I'm not going to talk about anything that happens in it whatsoever, but the power of Outer Wilds for lots of people is those like moments where you realize what this game is doing, the sort of like aha. And I went into Outer Wilds literally knowing zero about it, so when I did anything, I had like 3 or 4 of those in the first 2 hours, and it's super powerful in that sort of like realization, and it gives you it makes you, it's like humbling and makes you feel small. It's a game that like kind of has that effect on you, or has the chance to, and it certainly did with me. And Echoes of the Eye has like 4 or 5 of those moments, and they are on par or maybe more powerful than what I experienced in the base game. It is like so incredibly like humbling and weird and scary and confusing. And, you know, in the first 2 hours again, that game gives you a bunch of them, and then it gives you more later on, and then it continues to give you more. I would say the one sort of asterisk on Echoes of the Eye is that the ending is the way the DLC part of it ends is a bit anticlimactic, but then you can sort of complete the main game anyway, like, because you can go into Outer Wilds and basically complete, if you know what to do, you can just go do the thing. There's nothing stopping you except for like a 30-minute tutorial at the start of the first time you play it, but like you can just go do the thing. You don't have to like spend hours doing anything. You can speedrun it pretty quickly. So it does a thing where basically you can sort of have a different type of ending because of what happens in the DLC. And that's interesting, but it doesn't telegraph that, like, because that game doesn't telegraph anything. But outside of that, it is one of the most, you know, a remarkable DLC for a remarkable game. And much like Inscription, you can't even talk about this a little bit. Like, you can't, you know, you're an Outer Wilds person, and then you find a thing, and then the thing is fucked and weird and then exciting and then whatever. So that's my piece on Echoes of the Eye. Was there anyone else who had it, perchance?
I haven't played it yet, but I'm very excited to. Outer Wilds is one of my favorite games the last several years.
Oh, it's, yeah.
You're gonna love it. It's so good.
You'll have a blast, yeah. Frank, then round us out. We're almost down to worthy mentions, which I'll contextualize for everyone in a second. But what's the last game of your sort of primary three?
Yeah, it's funny because my top three were Resident Evil Village, Valheim, and Fortnite. Everything else are kind of like wild card or just nominations because I didn't get enough time to finish some of these other bulkier 2021 games.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you had Village on your list.
Yeah,
that's rad. Okay, are you going to your mention, or are you going to slip another one in there?
Yeah, it's funny because I would have to categorize it as like a mention because I just haven't played enough of it.
No, but is this, so we've all collected three, and then we have a sort of a special wildcard, which is like maybe a game that no one thought was going to get mentioned. Is that what you're going to talk about now, or are you going to talk? Are you slipping one in under the cover? Because you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I think. Let's see. Yeah, like because everything else, like I did like Ratchet and Clank, but not enough to like champion it as a game of the year. But that was like one of the other big games I beat this year. But everything, yeah.
So let me contextualize it then. And we'll go with you first. So what we're going to do next is I basically asked everyone to collect three games that were sort of like their de facto best three, and then the next one, the sort of wild card, was going to be a game that was like, wouldn't have made the top three, maybe wouldn't have made the top 10 necessarily, who knows, maybe it would have been 7, maybe it would have been 15 of their favorites, who knows, but it's a game that like you kind of want to mention because no one's going to mention it, or maybe it won't get called out. It's a hard thing to do because it requires you to like think about what everyone else is going to mention, so there's no fast and loose on this. It was kind of an opportunity to talk about a game that you really enjoyed that maybe if you had to weigh it up to other games might make the list, but you really want to talk about. So Frank, you go ahead first of all. What is your worthy mention wildcard?
Yeah, for 2021, and when we're discussing video games and the art and the medium of it, I have to mention Cruelty Squad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cruelty Squad is the game that is like, it occupies the same space as Hypnospace Outlaw, and just that this is a completely insane game aesthetically, but the gameplay is still really fun. The actual description on Steam is genius. It's Cruelty Squad, an immersive power fantasy simulator with tactical stealth elements set in a sewage-infused garbage world. The way I would describe it is it kind of feels like a first-person Hotline Miami, but instead of it being like 80s neon, it's like nightmare dystopia cyber puke. Like everything is like acid and inverted of what you'd expect. Like everything is like green and brown. It's like revolting. It's also like it's just so weird to be drawn to a game that is so like physically like ailing to look at. But like if it clicks, it clicks. Like it kind of just feels like playing an N64 game, but it's extremely like crude and funny and vulgar. And the writing is so like satirical and like it's just like
it's like an interactive shit post or something.
Yes,
that's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect way to describe it. And I only spent 2 hours playing it. I need to jump back into it. But man, I think that game is awesome. I like everyone should try it out. Like because it feels like an art film or something where it's just like, oh, this is crazy. I love it. So yeah, I didn't beat it yet. It actually is pretty hard. But I do want to spend more time playing it. But yeah, Cruelty Squad, like you have to mention if you're discussing games of 2021.
They got and you could not have nailed the concept of the worthy mentioned wildcard better, because no one's putting that.
No way.
I don't think it's their game of the year, but it's 100% like a game you want to talk about. It's so bizarre. Let's go to Dennis. Dennis, what was your worthy mention wildcard?
Yeah, so I can't gauge the popularity of this game because it's one of these ones that when I heard about it first, I probably just added a bunch of their social medias into my own little timeline. So then I started getting kind of this positive reverb that this game was big and good. And I'm not convinced anyone's heard of it. It's called Icarus.
No, I don't think I've heard of this. Anyone else?
No.
Yeah, it was in early access there back in August and finally last week, I think, broke through into a full release. It shares some of the beats of Valheim or Rust in a kind of more of a semi-sci-fi setting. Although it's kind of like one of those kind of old worldly sci-fis. I don't know how to describe that. Kind of, you get that.
Right.
Yeah, lived in sci-fi. I don't know. So decaying sci-fi maybe. But it has a twist on this in that the worlds aren't permanent. So you're not going into a world of friends and building a base and building all this and progressing forever. It's slightly roguelike in that you will drop into a mission in this world, complete the mission, and power up your character, and that will be permanent. But you will then leave the mission and then redrop again. But it has all the base building elements that you would expect from, say, Valheim. And then the missions aren't like 25 minutes, but they're also not, 2 months like you might have in Valheim.
Okay.
I for instance, I've played it with a friend across one mission across maybe 6 hour-and-a-half sessions, So it can be that.
You
it
can
also
leave, can you?
Yeah, you can kind of jump in and jump out. It doesn't have that same permanency at all that you would have. So we certainly couldn't have a server and just all hope to come back into it in a month's time and we'd all be there.
Right.
But yeah, so it's got this strange. Now it's buggy as all hell. Netcode is all over the place. Frame rate is a disaster, and I have a decent computer. But it's been fun and it's been stressful. It's been extremely stressful game. Death is quite punishing in it. It really does set you back, and I die a lot. And like you're just doing something, you're building a little house, everything's going nice. It's quite serene. It's quite beautiful to look at when it's running well. And then there's a bear, and the bear's just like one shot you, and you're back to square one. So yeah, that's been my. I don't know if I'm recommending it or putting it down. I'm not quite sure, but I'm enjoying it currently.
Nice. Now on my radar, Icarus First Cohort, available now on Steam for $30. It says, yeah, nice one. Yeah, again, another terrific use of the wild card. This is we're on a roll here. Jeremy, what is your wild card for the year?
Okay, so this is a game that I've seen a few people talk about, but I don't think it has garnered sort of the attention that it deserves. It is a short game, and I have not completed it yet because I got to it late, but I played enough of it to know that it is a worthwhile nomination for this part of the list. The game is Before Your Eyes.
You're kidding me.
Oh, yes.
You're kidding
Okay.
me.
I have also not played this, but
Jesse, is this yours
Jesse?
too?
Yeah, that was fine.
Oh my
Okay.
God. Are you the same person?
That's what I'm saying.
Jesse, we need to hang out.
I think so.
I won't talk about it too at length so that I leave some meat on this bone for Jesse to dive into. But it is a game that you control with your webcam by blinking, and so it is a first person game, and I won't give too much away about the story, but just based on the Steam page like summary, this isn't spoilery. You're like a disembodied soul who is revisiting memories from their life, and so you're kind of like it's your life is flashing before your eyes, hence the title Before Your Eyes. But the interesting thing about it is that like you're looking around these little kind of like memory pockets, and when a certain icon is on the screen, if you blink, it advances time to either the next memory or like a later part of that memory. And so not only is it incredibly immersive because like it's being controlled with your eye blinks, which is, I think it's always interesting when games tie in kind of like an unconventional control mechanism, whether that's like Kinect or things like that. But the thing that I found really interesting about it is sort of the philosophical implications of it, because when you're like, if you're like at the beach with your friends and like having a really nice day. When you look back on that memory, there will be parts of that day that stand out to you as kind of like symbolic of the quality of that memory, where you're like, oh, remember when we all like jumped in the ocean and like that was cool. But like when you're experiencing those moments, you don't experience them necessarily as like the kind of like standalone highlights. Like they may stick out to you at the moment because they're like they are temporally linked with the moments that precede and follow them. They're kind of just like things that happen. And so like I thought about this a lot recently in terms of like documentary filmmaking, because I was watching the this is going to sound like it's out of left field, but I was watching the Peter Jackson Beatles documentary.
Right.
And I was thinking that like the thing that documentary does so well is it goes through these countless hours of footage and it finds these moments where like amazing things happen. But the thing that's so remarkable about it is like when you see like, you know, Paul McCartney coming up with the song Get Back, and but like when it's happening, there's no like, he's not like, oh my God, I just wrote like one of the most famous songs of all time. It's just a thing that's happening. And so what Before Your Eyes does is it puts you in these little slices of memories. And so the thing that it instills in you is that when you blink, this is all going to go away. And so you're trying to like drink it all in and savor it. And it's like, it's almost like the concept of like mindfulness and meditation, where you're like bringing your full like awareness to bear in a moment and like feeling like the texture of the sand or like the water on your feet or like things like this. It's like it's almost giving you it's almost forcing you into a state of like mindfulness, where you feel the ephemerality, the transience of these moments as they're slipping through your fingers. And so it forces you into this mindset where you're savoring these moments knowing that they'll be gone soon in a way more visceral way than moving on to the next moment of hanging out with your friends on the beach, because it might cut to a totally different memory in a totally different place.
Fucking hell. All right, Jesse, follow that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. No, that was beautiful.
Well said, Jeremy.
That was
Thank
a beautiful description of the game. Absolutely, yeah. I really like it. That's it. No, I think it's really important. I don't just think it's really good for all the reasons that Jeremy just stated, but I do think it's a really important game for a lot of people to play. The last thing I played that reminded me of the same feeling I got when I finished Before Your Eyes was that Dragon Cancer. Because there aren't a lot of games that come out, indie or otherwise, that I think really touch on things that are very human problems. Because like one of my greatest fears, and it's a reality, I think, for a lot of people, one of my greatest fears is when I get older, of like forgetting things, of like not remembering important moments in my life or remembering them wrong, right? Things disappearing from your memory and your mind, and there being holes in things that you remember. And it's something that I don't want to spoil, but it's something. That's it. And you feel it when you're playing the game. Like Jeremy was saying, there's bits and pieces of the visuals that don't come through. You only remember the parts of it that you ended up experiencing, or that the character in the game rather ended up experiencing. And it's very surreal. It's a feeling that you can't evoke, I think, without playing it the way that it's meant to be played. Like you can play it with a controller, but the way that you play it, of blinking, using a webcam, and actually interacting with it physically, is so powerful to the actual part of play. Because when I think of like physically demanding elements of video games, it's how quickly you can tap the button, right? Or how if you can hold the button. For a lot of people, that's not something you can do. So unfortunately, Before Your Eyes is a kind of a game that is hard to recommend to people who might have difficulties using a webcam or something like that, right? But when I think of that physical demand for video games, there's not a lot of that, right? Like that's not something that games do a lot of because of the nature of the input, right? It really is just rapidly pressing buttons. In this, and again, Jeremy was saying, like, you know, you don't want moments to end. It's the only game I can think of that I've ever played that I have physically strained myself to stay in a moment. Like I literally was crying at points. Tears were coming out of my eyes, not because I was sad, but because I just didn't want to leave that moment. I wanted to see how it played out. And I was like, this is something that, you know, and that, I don't want to get too, you know, super sad about the plot of this game, but Jeremy was talking and it's like tears are welling up my eyes thinking about the ending of it. It's just, it's something that that only video games can do. It's something only video games can do. You know, you can make a movie that's about this, but it cuts when it cuts. But in real life, you can try to force yourself to stay in that moment. You can try to make it, you could try your hardest, but it will literally hurt you to do that. And eventually it will have to cut. You have to move on. And that hurt me deep in my soul. And just thinking about it now, man, oh my goodness. If you have like 4 or 5 hours and however much money it costs, I think everyone needs to play Before Your Eyes. It is so important.
There you go. $9.99 on Steam. Pick it up if you want it. Before Your Eyes. And that's all. Oh, wait, no, I have to do my one. Thank you, gents. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. I heard some people whispering about it a few weeks back, but both of your recommendations there have definitely pushed me over the edge. My last one, my worthy mentioned wild card, is another one we did a documentary on, and I suspect maybe Frank might be with me on the fun of this game. But god damn it, is Chivalry 2 a good fucking time? That's a real good time. Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised how much I enjoyed this. I played the original Chivalry. And I feel like I probably ran into the mod at some stage. I played a lot of Half-Life mods. But it wasn't really for me. It was kind of a little, like, it wasn't self-serious. It was definitely like taking the piss of itself a little bit. But it was, you know, kind of tricky and a little bit rough around the edges. Chivalry 2 is just like, they recently put in a mode that is just a bar fight. But really, that's just what the game is anyway. It's just a fucking big bar fight. I have never played a game where getting killed is fun, like, because you just get killed in the most stupid, fucked up ways ever. They get you back in the game almost immediately. Killing people on that game is so rewarding. Every time you chop someone's head off or their arm off, or like you kill 2 people in a row, or you swing a sword and 3 people somehow get killed, or like you throw something and it like crushes them. Like, it's the game that I've been able to like point at for people is Half-Life 2 Deathmatch. That's what this is. Do you remember that feeling of Half-Life 2 Deathmatch of just like any moment could be hilarious, and often is, and then a toilet hits you in the head and you're dead? That's what Chivalry 2 is, except, you know, you can also like scream and everyone is screaming all the time, and the like voice acting is ridiculous, and they set you up like they have like, they'll put trebuchets in the game so you can launch rocks, but of course you can also get in the trebuchet and they can launch you into the battle, and you can pick up just about anything. You can pick up food and throw it at people, or if I recently found out when I was doing the interviews that you can just hit the charge button, the screen button, when you have food in your hand, and you'll just eat the food, and also it gives you back health. Like, there's just, it's an emergent multiplayer sandbox that is 100% in on the joke, and it's just so much fun to play. Frank, I know you played a lot of it because you did all that awesome gameplay. Did you have a good time with Chivalry 2?
Yeah, that was another like week or two where it was like, oh, this is awesome. I had fun playing it. There was no real points of frustration. Like, I'll play Call of Duty or Battlefield, and there'll be times where I'm like angry, like I'm actually angry from it. Chivalry 2 is like, oh, like it's pretty easy going, and I do like that there's different classes. Like, even when you get to play as an archer, it's pretty satisfying standing back and just flinging arrows at people. There is also a lot of team killing that happens, but it's pretty funny. Yeah, it's a cool game. The one thing I haven't experienced is playing with friends. So I don't know if maybe like once it comes to Steam, I might like jump in with some other people, or if it's on Game Pass or something. But like, I want to experience it as a squad. But even playing it by yourself, it's pretty great. The community for the game is fun. Like when I wasn't doing capture, I just left the chat on, and people are kind of like role playing as if they're like in Game of Thrones and stuff, like getting into it and speaking like it. Like, yeah, it's a pretty fun game.
Awesome. So those are our lists as they stand. We'll round them up at the end. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into the comments and pick out some games that we didn't talk about. But also, while I'm doing that, the 4 of you, just think about some other games that maybe you wish you could have mentioned that didn't get brought up. If there's any one of them, just jot it down. It may come up when I'm mentioning some of these podcasts, but just we have a bit more time, and I want to maybe sprinkle in a couple more quick hits if we can do it. But a couple of ones that came up in the community. that were interesting. I'm going to let Conor McNamara have this one. Has to be Psychonauts 2. It's funny with a deceptively deep and mature story that kids will enjoy for what it is, but adults would enjoy for what it says. So maybe that's when we can swing back around to. We also have Rick Osborne said the Ghost of Tsushima, which of course had a sort of re-release this year and also the DLC. So that's got to be one. Mike Casey says game of the year for me had to be Returnal. Challenging gameplay, gorgeous environments, and a story that lends itself to multiple interpretations and online community debate. I was obsessed. Mike Morrow also saying Returnal. Rocky saying Psychonauts 2. Clarice says maybe unpopular, but Mass Effect Legendary Edition. It felt like a last visit, a favorite haunt from years past, but where I knew more of the secret awesome spots and could get a new perspective on it all. Yeah, that's one of the more popular remasters that came out this year. Well, with certain people anyway. Shell Comics says 12 minutes. The voice acting was amazing and then somehow managed to build tension even when you can't see the characters' faces. It has a lot of fun to figure out the puzzles, and my game of the year. That one was interesting because that one's fairly divisive, at least I've seen on Reddit and stuff. Couple more here. Vaughn Felder says Hitman 3, which of course came out in January of this year, would you believe? They built upon a great foundation from the first two games, but the new maps feel super distinct from the previous ones, and having the previous maps on there makes for one of the best packages I've played in a long time. Jacob Longo says Halo Infinite. It's hot off the presses, that one. The grapple shot is the most fun I've had with a single player mechanic in years. Swinging around the world was amazing, and it led to so many unexpected epic moments during combat, not to mention how gracefully it managed the narrative mess that Halo 5 created. And let me see if there's one more one here that hasn't been represented. A lot of those have come up. Let's go with this one because we did the doc on it. IGNU that says Loop Hero, by virtue of being the only game I bought this year. It's addicting in a way no game has been for me in years. It's a mashup of so many genres that it's surprising it works at all, but somehow it does. Dennis, was there anyone for you? Any other worthy mentions or games you wanted to talk about?
Maybe it's another low-key one. I'd love to mention Satisfactory, and I'm sure people played it years gone by. But again, it's still at early access. It's probably not truly fair to put it in. Although if Fortnite's in, maybe it's fair. But no, in a similar vein, Dyson Sphere Program. Cube is wrong because that's an item in the game. Dyson Sphere Program was a Factorio-esque. I don't know, factory sim, but it had a bit of spacefaring and got kind of obscenely complicated after, that first kind of 20 minutes where you're enjoying just matching up numbers of ore into what I need to make some little cube. But I thought it was quite polished, and I was able to get a lot of enjoyment from it. One that's still I think it's had issues with its translation and stuff like that, so it kind of didn't always...
Chinese, is it?
Yeah, it had a kind of charming clunkiness to it, but after being addicted to the multiplayer kind of Satisfactory, I stepped back into a non-Factorio, let's say. So that's one for me.
Nice one. Frank, what about yourself?
Yeah, one game, this is late for me, but Audrey and I started playing Age of Empires 4. And there's a specific mode that we're hooked on. It's 2v2 versus AI. So we can play co-op. Audrey and I, we each have our own base, and then we're gearing up to go fight the other two AI, and it's so fun. And I feel like each game could take maybe between 15 to 30 minutes, and as soon as it's over we want to start more, and it has that satisfaction of just building up your base and going to war. It's so great, and it's a Game Pass game, so I was able to immediately install it. But Age of Empires 4, I feel like that's going to be a game that we're going to stick with for a few months, but I can't believe how hooked we are.
You've mirrored, myself and my wife spend most of quarantine doing exactly what you just described in Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, 2v2 against the other ones. So she would work on boats and I would work on armies or something. That's so cool. We haven't actually had a chance to do it in 4 yet, so I'm excited to give that a whirl. Jeremy, what about yourself? You got another one to chuck on the pile here?
I do. I feel torn about this game because it is a game that I think does some things so brilliantly but didn't totally capture me, and I'll sum up very quickly why. I played a bunch of Sable.
Yeah.
Okay, it is maybe top 3 most beautiful games aesthetically I've ever played in my entire life. The guys who made it are absolute like shader wizards, and I think it points to something important about the future of games, which is that I think that games for a long time have been going in this direction of like just upping the fidelity, especially in AAA games, because I think that is the most reliable like vector on which you can improve a game. I think innovating in game mechanics and design is much riskier, as we talked about with like Deathloop. Like it's much more rare that you see a huge departure for like a AAA game in like trying a totally new thing mechanically. But I think that like in the indie games space right now, you see a lot of very like constrained, restrained, and clever aesthetic and stylistic decisions being made, and I think that is like kind of like a graphical fidelity degrowth. And what I think Sable does that is really important is it commits itself to this kind of like flat, it's very inspired by Mobius, Jean Giraud, the graphic artist, comic book artist. It does this like flat style that I think is so like it's so effective because it is minimalist and it's low poly, but it doesn't impoverish the sense of like grandiosity or scale of the world at all. And so I think it's a demonstration of the way in which like not every like you don't need to have like a 1,000 scientists on your team like photo scanning rocks in the desert to make like a Death Stranding like photorealistic game in order to create that sense of scale and place. I think that Sable does it by committing itself to a very restrained, disciplined, and like intentional sense of aesthetic. The only reason it didn't capture me totally is that the sort of like core experience of it is experiencing the emptiness of this world and the mystery of it, and for me that I needed like a little bit more than just the exploration and platforming. I wish that there was like another kind of like element to the loop. But in terms of like world building and world creation and curation and like aesthetics, it was like one of the greatest experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, I echo that basically entirely. Jesse, what about yourself? Do you have another one to add here?
I do. I actually took a quick peek at the comments, and there's one person that called it out. So thank you, Dirk. Called out the game Mundaun. Now, it's super weird. It's a game where you're traveling through the Swiss Alps, I believe. It's a Swiss mountain called Mundaun. That's the mountain you're climbing.
Okay. How do you spell it?
Mundaun. It's, I believe,
Okay.
a single developer. It might be a small handful of people. I can't remember from the credits.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, Alex Navarro at Nextlander was talking it up a bunch back when he was in Job Bomb, actually. Yeah. So what is it first person?
Yeah, so it's a first-person kind of narrative exploration game. There are light puzzles, but for the most part, you're kind of just exploring around this mountain. You're trying to figure out, I believe, what happened to your grandfather. And there's like a fire. That's how it starts, basically. You go to this charred house, and you see your father or your grandfather in the house, and you're trying to figure out what happened to him, why did he die? But the big hook of the game is the atmosphere and the environments. It's a very snowy, like, Swiss environment, basically. Like, it's just like weird.
Is it entirely in sepia?
It is. It's completely sepia tone. It's like you're playing through old photographs of places you've never been before. It's very strange. It's also, like I said, just very atmospheric. Like it's wind swept, snowy areas, but it's also very scary. Like it's not trying to be. I don't think there are moments where you definitely feel like it's trying to be. But for the most part, it's just very straight. And you notice that like that's what they're going for. Like that's the mood they're going for is just a straight-laced kind of, it's not scary, but it's liminal, I think is a good way of putting it. Like it's a very liminal kind of game where it's a place that you haven't been before, but you almost feel like you're supposed to be there. It's just very good.
Wild. Yeah. I thank you for putting that back on my radar. I remember that being a game that had enough people had said I should play it back when it came out, and I have 100% forgotten about it. So
it's worth your time. It's very European, by the way.
Yeah, Mundaun. Well, it's going to be boring then for two of us here at least. Yeah, Mundaun. Google it now while you still can. And that's our list. That's all. Well, I guess, sorry, if I was to mention one, honestly, it would probably be just Halo Infinite, because I have adored the multiplayer in that game. I don't know why I don't know what happened, but it somehow managed to make me feel like 2007 Xbox Live. I've been having a blast in it. Also, I think the fact that it's free to play means that there's a sort of constant churn of chum of like young idiots who don't know how to play Halo. So like it's not like, you know, Gears of War Week 2 where suddenly like you're shit again. Like you know, there's plenty of noobs in Halo Infinite, so I'm fairly consistently in like the top, you know, top 5 of games because these dumbasses don't know how to swap to a pistol. So yeah, probably that's pretty good. And also shout out to Chicory. I didn't complete it, but that's
great.
That's a really
Love that one.
Cool, beautiful game. Yeah, which is worth a shout. Yeah, loads of other games to mention. I guess games we didn't mention that people are talking about. Unpacking, Forza Horizon 5 was a big one. Metroid Dread, of course. The Guardians of the Galaxy game won Best Narrative at the Game Awards. It has the reason I was playing that game, I enjoyed it so much, was the story. Weirdly enough, it's really well done. Ratchet and Clank was mentioned by Frank briefly. Shin Megami Tensei 5, Animal Crossing's New Horizons 2.0. I guess you could chuck in there as well. Pokemon Unite came out. Super Mario, what was it called? Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, the add-on for 3D World. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty significant back when it came out. Nier Replicant. Dorf Romantic was a really fun indie game. We talked about it a couple of months back, I think, on here. Yeah, and Back for Blood.
I got one more to slip in. Deltarune Chapter 2. Very interesting to see. It's so fascinating that like Toby Fox has had so much success with Undertale that he can just make what he wants, give it away for free, and do it in exactly the way that he wants. And I think that that's like, in a perfect world, every artist with a vision could do exactly that. But obviously that's not the case because of the chains of money existing. But like, God, it's so fun to just like be in that, in his vision, unrestrained, and like his sense of humor, and like, yeah, I Deltarune Chapter 2 deserves special mention here.
Well, it's a good thing he's an artist who can keep pulling it off.
Yeah.
So that's a good spot to be in. All right, so our final lists. For me, it was Valheim, Outer Wilds, Echoes of the Eye, Resident Evil Village, and my worthy mention wildcard was Chivalry 2. For Dennis's, it was Valheim, Inscription, and Death's Door, with a worthy mention for Icarus. For Frank, it was Valheim, Fortnite, and Resident Evil Village. Worthy mention went to the sick fuck Cruelty Squad. Jeremy's were Inscription, The Forgotten City, and Deathloop, with Before Your Eyes, his mention. And Jesse's Inscription, It Takes Two, and Deathloop, with Before Your Eyes, because he was copying Jeremy's homework.
You fucker. You fucker.
I'm sorry, but blame the third letter in your name not being alphabetically superior.
Not being an R. Yeah.
Jesse, don't think of it as me stealing your list. Think of it as us kindling a friendship.
Yeah.
There we go. Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. So if you're totting up the numbers, which we're not doing, but if you wanted to do that, it would be a tie between Valheim and Inscription, which I think sounds pretty good for 2021. I'll put it that way. Thank you all for taking the time to chat to us today. Dennis, appreciate you being here, buddy.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate
thanks
it.
for all the awesome work. Frank, same to you. What was the most annoying game you had to capture gameplay for in 2021? Well, and was it Black Mesa?
Oh man, what was it? It was I was thinking that it was a game. Oh, it was, I think Grand Theft Auto, because there was no quick save. So there was a few specific missions we'd have to get, and like the cops are so like you die so fast in these games, and it's tough. But yeah, so the original old school GTAs were tough to capture, but I'm excited for the DMA design documentary.
Yeah, coming soon. Jeremy, what was the hardest doc you had to edit this year? Thank you for coming. What was the hardest doc?
I am currently still editing Black Mesa. Just as a tease to anyone listening to this, it is currently over 2 hours, and it is a giant tapestry of Valvean game design and Half-Life like lore, like mega deep dive lore, all wrapped in like basically how do you remake the Godfather of video games? Like how do you remake one of the most beloved games of all time and not get crucified for it?
Terrific. Harder edit than Loop Hero?
Oh, it is the longest thing I've edited in my entire film career.
Okay, but harder than Loop Hero.
Yeah, harder and longer and uncut.
Just less Russian. Jesse, thank you for all your incredible work since joining the team later this year. Best episode of the podcast, do you think?
Oh, the last one for sure. GTA radio stations. That was fantastic. I love working on that one.
Super strong one. And since I did all these questions, let's circle back to Dennis. Dennis, you did incredible work archiving all of our the metadata for basically every doc we've done since back in September of 2016. But this also exposed you to a bunch of the docs, and you obviously hadn't watched every single one of them. So was there any doc that you watched during that process that ended up like being a game that you picked up, or was like a video that you enjoyed more than some of the others?
Yeah, this has been a problem, and it's a problem even just with the guys going through like these kind of little forgotten games from this year that my purchase history has gone a bit weird. My wish lists have gone deeply strange. So one game, I think it's got to be Hitman, and it's not only is it Hitman, but it's Hitman kind of 1, 2, and now 3, and then throw into the fact that nearly everybody is putting 3 in amongst the game of the year. So yeah, I think that's the blind spot that I'm definitely going to get in on. But it's a problem. Every documentary I watch, it's not to blow smoke, but I just want to play that game. So I'm not really blowing smoke towards you anyway. I'm blowing towards the developers.
Exactly. We don't pick shit games, put it that way. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you to all of you for listening to the podcast. Thanks to our patrons for keeping the show going, especially the past couple of years. Next year is going to be a big change for us. We're hitting the road. We're getting out there. We're doing it safely on 4 wheels. Maybe on 4 wheels that you can sleep in. We're still trying to figure all that stuff out. But we have really exciting projects that involve us getting out into meat space and talking to people and reconnecting with the world. And we'll be excited to do it. So thank you so much. This was probably, it might be the final podcast of the year. There's one more I'm trying to throw together for Christmas. But we'll see if it even happens. If it doesn't, we'll see you on the other side. I hope you have a wonderful holidays. Hope you spend time with family and friends. Relax, play some video games, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care.